So I thought the audiobook debate was dumb until one argument actually made me pause. When people brought up the are audiobooks reading debate, I always just kind of rolled my eyes because a quarter of the books I read are audiobooks, and I feel like I can get just as much out of an audiobook as a book that I read with my eyes, at least when I'm paying active attention. Of course, not when I zone out, but I'm usually pretty good with that. And honestly, a lot of the dumb arguments against audiobooks being reading do keep getting debunked. For example, we've been seeing a lot of coverage of the whole idea of audiobooks being passive reading and physically reading with your eyes being active reading is being debunked a little bit because when you read an audiobook with your ears, it activates the same regions of your brain as when you're reading the book with your eyes. And honestly, also, I don't really care if your literature professor in college told you that to really be a reader and to actually be engaging with the text, you always have to annotate a book or have a little notebook to the side where you write down your own little personal thoughts and you interact with the author and you're constantly making comments and all of this. That is a nice privilege for people who have a lot of time to do that, and it's nice if you want to do that, and that's always an option. But for a lot of people who have regular demanding jobs, you don't always have enough energy to make every single reading experience a life-changing moment where you're writing in your books and thinking about them like it's almost a journal where you're having an interactive relationship with the author. We don't have time for that always, or at least even if we have time, we don't have energy. It's impressive that we're reading at all. Leave us alone. But one argument from the people who think audiobooks don't count as reading has stood out to me as being worth making. So I'm going to be making a concession here in this video, and I'm going to admit to this group of people that they are right about one particular thing. And as someone who likes to be right and someone who likes to be able to defend strong stances, making a concession is a little painful, but it's warranted. They have a point. I'm not going to mention anyone specifically in this video who has made arguments against audiobooks being reading because I think it can sometimes be hard just to have the minority opinion in general, and you don't need someone else bringing it up for you and bringing attention to you. Honestly, that's just what I think about a lot of things. I think we kind of pile on people way too often, and I don't want to be part of that. And at this point, we can safely say that the majority of people do count audiobooks as reading, so if you have the opinion that they're not reading, you're kind of in the minority opinion at this point. But trust me when I say that I've seen several people make this point, and to be fair, it's pretty good. Let's set up a room. This is the storytelling room. I sit down crisscross applesauce and I'm ready to engage with the story. I'm not a writer, so I need a storyteller. I pick up The Way of Kings, I start reading the book, and in my storytelling room enters the author. After a while, the book is chunky, I don't feel like holding it up anymore, it's heavy, and I want to do laundry, so I put the book down and I put on the audiobook. It's no longer just me and the author in the space. Now it's me, the author, and in the case of this book, the two narrators. Just like the author is part of my reading experience, these two narrators become part of my reading experience. You might be thinking, so what? And I kind of agree with the so what statement there, but I do think that there is a distinction that is valuable here. The narrator or narrators of an audiobook will definitely change and or influence how you interpret a text. Even just the inflections of their voice or the passages that they emphasize or the pacing that they choose is going to change your reading experience from what it would have been when it was just you and the author in the room. They have a way of reading the book to you. At the very, very least, they are involved. Their biases, their influences, to some extent how they view the world might make it into how they narrate the audiobook and how you hear it from them. And I don't think that this is good or bad by any means, so I'm not making like a big point or anything. It's just something that people have said, and I think there's something to that. Honestly, I don't know if it makes things better or worse. I think it just changes it. I don't think there's any reason to moralize the difference between just you and the author versus you, the author, and the narrator all coming together to experience a story. And I don't even know necessarily if I'm convinced of the effect that it causes. There is an argument to be made that if you are interpreting the text by yourself just with what the author has written, there might be more ways to read the book than if you hear it through the lens of someone who is reading the story to you, that they might kind of narrow the way you think of things just because of the way they deliver the text. I mean, that kind of makes sense to me. I think that that's definitely something that logically seems to connect. It could also just depend on you, though, as the reader. I think that you can still have your own experiences and still interpret things drastically differently, even when you have the influence or slight bias of someone who is involved reading it to you. And I think that there's definitely an argument too to be made to sometimes it enhances the experience to have the author, the narrator, and you, the listener/reader. Some audiobooks are partially good because of the narration in them. So there is this whole interpretation argument that the way you listen to a book is different when the narrator is involved. In my day-to-day life, I don't think that this is an argument that I really care all that much about, especially when I sit down and listen to an audiobook for entertainment, or when I'm choosing to listen to an audiobook rather than music or something else that I could be listening to while I do the dishes. I don't think it needs to be that deep. But the fact that there is a difference between the two is definitely interesting. Did it change my mind? So I concede that point. Reading with your eyes and reading with your ears are different because there are more people in the interpretation room for the text. Now, I don't think that this is a very strong argument for reading audiobooks not being reading. I think reading audiobooks counts despite the fact that they are in a different format and there are some different elements in the audiobook that you won't have in a physical book you read with your eyes. I don't think that it disqualifies them at all. Any argument that claims that audiobooks aren't reading feels exclusionary to me. There might be formal definitions that differentiate between the two that to me might be a little bit outdated. Language changes with time, and at this point in our cultural shared experience, I think that it's not useful to make it so people feel like when they read audiobooks, they're not reading. I think more people getting involved in reading in any format that they can engage with it is good. Not everyone has the same amount of time to sit down with a physical book as they do to listen to an audiobook because you can listen while you're doing other things. And let's not forget that in some cases, reading a physical book for some people is physically impossible, and the only way they can engage with the story is through the audiobook. So don't get me wrong, if you only read audiobooks or if you mostly read audiobooks, I would still call you a reader. But I did learn something. I think it's good to hear people out that you disagree with. Sometimes they make a good point, and I think the people who don't think audiobooks are reading made an interesting point here. The narrator is definitely involved in the experience, and when you plug in an audiobook, it's no longer just you and the author. If you love reading and you liked this video, check out this next video about why your TBR is stressing you out.